Hi, I'm Father Alex, and I am the host of the Godcast. I am also the vicar of St Matthew's Church in Burnley, and I'm also the author of Our Daily Bread, From Argos to the Altar, a priest story, which is out now with and published by Harper North. This podcast is looking back at the Godcast from the early days, and the Godcast actually started during lockdown when I was just looking for a way to try and entertain some of my congregation, and just by chance, I followed Eamonn Holmes on Twitter, and I thought I'd approach him and ask him if he'd come on, and lo and behold, Eamonn said yes. So the first clip of this look back at some very famous guests on the Godcast is with the one and only Eamonn Holmes.
About your TV career, Eamonn, and it struck me that it's quite diverse, and I was wondering how somebody like yourself goes from presenting songs of praise to sitting on the panel of Keith Lemon's Celebrity Juice. Yeah. That's quite a contrast. Do you think about these things when you sign up for them, or yes, do you just go with what floats your boat?
I do think about them. I could justify almost everything I do, and there's very few of any programs I've ever presented that I've thought, oh, I have to do this or I don't want to do this. That's your worst nightmare, is to be presenting something you don't believe in or you don't like, have no interest in. At the same time, you've got to you've got to maintain a career. I mean, people think it's no God-given right to turn up and be on the television. I mean, I'm just reading today about Question of Sport and Sue Barker losing her job there, but that's what we live with, doing what we do. You live with the fact that it's going to come to an end. It's never going to be forever. So
what do you think about that though, Eamonn?
The next guest you're going to listen to is a man who perhaps needs little introduction, the one and only Alastair Campbell. Now, Alastair Campbell is a big Burnley fan, as I am, and he is somebody who's in the town quite often. And during the lockdown, I thought I'd approach Alastair and see if he'd come on the Godcast, and lo and behold, he said yes as well. Now, Alastair has gone on to do many things in his career, and popular podcaster and author. He also wrote the foreword for my book, Our Daily Bread, From Argos to the Altar. So here is a clip now of Alastair Campbell.
I think it's dangerous that we appear to be having as our leaders people who really don't care whether what they're saying is true. I posted a video today of stuff that he has said about this Brexit situation, right? The opposite of what he's now saying. And he knew what he was saying when he said it. So I just find that difficult to deal with. I know people will say, well, all politicians lie, but actually I don't think they do.
Alastair, I don't want to get into this, but people would say that was the case with the invasion of Iraq.
I know they do. I know they say that, and I know that's not true. I know they say it, but I know what I did. I know that I've been put through the mill in 6 different inquiries on it, and I know that none of those inquiries accuse me of lying. And I know people like to say Tony Blair and all that, and that I think is part of.
But do you not think I should?
Probably you're rightly alluding to, where you have an enemy, just hit them.
But surely I can say I don't agree with his politics, but I like him. It's like saying,
yeah.
And I do, and I think he's a character. I think
he's a character.
He's great. He's great for the political arena because he creates.
Neil Warnock's a character.
One of my favourite interests is current affairs and politics. I really do enjoy watching anything in that genre. And the next 2 people we're going to listen to couldn't really be further apart. We are going to listen to George Galloway, who came on, who spoke eloquently and is a wonderful narrator. You might not necessarily agree with his politics, but he turned out to be a fabulous guest. So firstly, George, and then somebody who is perhaps couldn't really be further removed, and that is Isabel Oakeshott. And Isabel joined me during the pandemic as well. So here are now George Galloway and Isabel Oakeshott.
We've had the BBC at our church this week, and there was a quite a well-respected journalist with us, and I just asked, if he knew if you were a man of faith. Are you a man of faith or not?
Very much so. I am a strong believer in God. and have always publicly proclaimed so, which doesn't gain me much credit in liberal and so-called progressive circles. They regard that as a mark of cultural conservatism, and they say that as if it's a bad thing. But I'm very strongly a man of faith, yes.
Well, I'm just interested to get you this. This is part of the political week on the Godcast, and I was talking to Isabel short about these things. Tim Farron gave up his leadership of the Liberal Party predominantly, I think, because of his faith. What was your take on that when that happened, George?
It's a sign of the times. He'd chosen the wrong party if he wanted to be mindful of God. He chose the wrong party because liberals and so-called progressives in general have no time for faith and have no time for the idea of God. They think that we are somehow infantilized by such belief. Although, as I always point out, believing that all of this came from nothing is a far more far-fetched idea than believing that a creator made it and set it in motion.
Yeah. And politics floating around the church at the moment. I was just wondering if I could get your views on a couple of things. So, for example, the church has received quite a lot of criticism in recent months about the way it's handled closures relating to COVID-19. What's your take on that, Isabel, and how the church have dealt with that matter?
I've been really disappointed, actually. I think there's been real weakness of leadership from the church on this, the Church of England, I would say in particular, but that's only because I'm more familiar with the structure there and it is the established church here. I think I would have liked to have seen a much bolder and more robust response on so many levels. First of all, it seems to me that the church leadership has been pretty supine on some of the regulations that have been enforced. Blithely accepting no services at Easter, for example. I mean, this was a really important time near the very beginning of the pandemic. I would have liked to seen church ministers out in the graveyards holding outdoor services, really making a point of this is not going to stop us having collective acts of worship, which are nonetheless safe and socially distanced, but we will still come together. And they did none of that. I think that there's been a woeful lack of leadership on, for example, the attendance of funerals and some of the awful, awful examples of overzealous application of rules in funeral ceremonies. You may or may not have seen those absolutely sickening pictures of officials in a crematorium service telling people that they shouldn't be allowed to put their arms around each other. I mean, this is absolutely obscene. And we've heard nothing at all from any of the archbishops on why.
One of the nicest guys who's appeared on the Godcast is somebody who I used to watch as a kid on the BBC, but he's now, in more recent years, been the entertainment reporter from Hollywood, Ross King, MBE. And Ross came on and shared some nice stories, and here's just a clip now.
Yeah, I've known Piers for a long time. Piers is a great dinner companion, because he's got so many wonderful stories, as you can imagine, over the years. And he's got some great stories that obviously that he couldn't ever tell on air. So it's great to hear them when you're at dinner with them. And, I've considered him a pal. We've had great banter over the years. We've had, great dinners out here in LA as well. He really shook things up, and that's Piers is very much his MO, isn't it? He comes in, he shakes things up. And that's what he's certainly done in the world of breakfast television.
So I do hope you're enjoying listening to some of these famous faces that appeared on the Godcast. One of my other great interests is music, and I have had some incredible guests appearing with me on the Godcast. And now I'm going to just listen to three of my favourite guests. We have Chris Difford from Squeeze, followed by Rick Witter, who is the lead singer for Shed 7, and Spider Stacey, who was part of the iconic and legendary band The Pogues. So I do hope you enjoy listening to these guys now.
My best friend, who was a drug dealer, had got sober, which really pissed me off. But then when I realized how he changed and what he'd got, that's where my rock bottom came, because I saw something in him that I ideally wanted to have but couldn't have. And it took me a good year or so to find out where my knees were. Yeah. And then once I was on my knees, then the only way was to come back up.
So this time we'll probably do all of those hits, and we'll include a couple of album tracks off the most recent album, Instant Pleasures, that we've never played live before. So that'll be entertaining for us as well as the fans, because, you know, I get asked a lot, do you get bored of playing the old songs? And I never do, genuinely never do, because of the reaction it gets. I mean, why would you not? You know, why would you stop yourself from being joyful?
Do you have a favourite venue, Rick? I discovered a new venue, and you've played there, was the Castlefield Ball. I saw the Wombats there a few years back, and I thought, what a fantastic! It was absolutely buzzing that night. It was rocking outside. You've got favourite venues that you really want on your tour list?
Well, yeah, you mentioned a good gig. That, I mean, ours was absolutely incredible. It just, everything seemed to align on that day. I think there was, the World Cup was on, or there was some major football competition was on. But that particular day, there was no football on, so that didn't distract from it. And the weather was absolutely amazing. Everyone was in high spirits. It was a great gig. But the Barrowlands in Glasgow is an absolutely immense gig. They've got a spring floor, so just the atmosphere in there, even though everyone's throwing a beer at you, they're doing it in a nice way. But to be honest, again, it goes back to the crowd. We're a very lucky band, and we've got a very, very intensely loyal following. So it doesn't really matter where we are. It's what's happening inside that room that matters. And as I said before, it could be Blackburn on a drizzly Monday night. You know, it doesn't really matter.
No. Is that
no disrespect to venues, but I think.
Yeah, go on, Rick. Just finish what you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say no disrespect to venues, because venues are very, very important things. But there isn't anywhere in particular where I desperately want to go to, because I just think wherever we are, it is just such an immense atmosphere, you know. So
yeah, it's over with Shane as the front man. Was that a difficult time for you?
Well, it would have been much worse if we hadn't sort of been able to replace him with Joe Strummer, which just like from my own point of view was just this kind of like ridiculous sort of teenage fantasy come true, you know. I mean, you know. So.
Of course, it would be remiss of me not to interview anybody from the political or religious world. And who better than to interview than the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, who was a fine guest. And here's a clip from our discussion a few years ago.
In our tradition, there are different views, not on whether gay and lesbian people should be welcome in the church, but how do we give expression to that welcome? And my commitment is to find what is the very best way of expressing that welcome. And therefore, me saying what I think as the person who really is called, as it were, to hold the chair and hold the unity right now is not the most helpful thing to do. But as I'm sure you will pick up and others will pick up from what I'm saying is, my hope is that we can find a way of giving greater welcome to LGBTI plus people, and I am ashamed of some of our failings in the past, well, and indeed in the present on all of this.
Yeah. And finally, on the Godcast kind of reflection today, another one of my great loves is comedy, and I was raised on summer season, end of the pier shows, and you can only imagine, mind you like, when I was fortunate enough to meet two two guys who've featured heavily on summer seasons. Firstly, Billy Pearce, Yorkshire lad, a very funny guy. And then finally, in this look back, a legendary figure from the comedy duo Cannon and Ball, the one and only Tommy Cannon. So have a listen now.
Again, a good laugh, which that's what I give them, hopefully. That's my job, and I love it. And as with us, Bobby Davro, I'm working with Bobby, and he's been a mate of mine for a long, long time. And we are, perhaps you'd call us old school now, but, you know, the thing is, people's perception of us is that we're sort of old-fashioned 80s, you know, at our day type of thing. But when you're out there on the green, we make them laugh. That's the thing. It's still there. It's not that we've particularly gone out of fashion. Once we get them in there, we make them laugh, which is the most important thing as a comedian. If you didn't make them laugh, you won't laugh last long, would you?
No. And if I can ask some, just a bit deeper, Billy, I mean, I love comedy. I had a go at it myself to pretty disastrous, but anyway, and I'm a big fan of Les Dawson. I love Les Dawson, and I just think that, you know, within a clown, in a comic, sometimes there's a darker side, isn't there? You know, Tommy Cooper, Freddie Starr, those kind of guys, and
yes,
you think you need a bit of, I don't know if it's insanity or madness, or, you know, do you think adversity is a key ingredient to humour?
Well, first of all, I won't put myself in the same bracket as somebody like Les Dawson, who I'm a massive fan. And I knew him from the days when I mentioned about I was a stagehand at the Grand in Leeds. And he did pantomime there before he was massive. And he used to practice out-of-tune piano things and all that. And once again, in those days, the stars didn't talk to the crew. Yeah. They were kind of separate from that.
Typical Bobby, bless him. He FaceTimed me on Monday morning, sat in a bed with 6 nurses round the bed and said, Tony, all the nurses want to wave to you, so I put me on FaceTime. And there they were all waving to me. And I said to him, I thought you were poorly. He said, oh, I'm all right. I said, good. Excuse me. I said, so get better soon, mate. The biggest problem for me was I couldn't see him. I couldn't visit him because of COVID rules and regulations and stuff. And 10 days later, he passed away. It was so quick. I didn't know where I felt like I'd had my right arm taken off me. And, I haven't worked, not because Bob's passed away, but certainly because of COVID. I haven't done any work for the past 2 years. And
so there we are. There is a look back at some of the very famous faces and names that have appeared on the Godcast. There's well over 130 interviews online. You can look at them on YouTube or any of the social media podcast platforms, or just Google the Godcast. If you like them, perhaps you could follow me on YouTube, or maybe even follow me on Twitter, and you'll find me at Alex DJ Frost. So from myself, Alex, host of the Godcast, Vicar of St. Matt's, Burnley, and author of Our Daily Bread, Priest Story, Argos to the Altar, thanks for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. And for now, I'll just say goodbye and God bless.